This meeting is being recorded.
We're going to have to move around some items. We do have action items on this agenda that we absolutely need to take care of today as a CoC. So I'm hopeful we need two more, I believe. But this brings up a different and larger issue. And hopefully you've already seen it in the agenda packet, but we'll be addressing the CoC charter and interlocal agreement today. Local agreement is due to sunset at the end of the month, which will allow for greater flexibility with our meeting time space. However, at least while I am chair and per the CoC charter, which is not going to be that much longer I'm chair, but per the CoC charter, as it currently reads with amendments, we are going to remain in person for our board meetings. So we will need a quorum. The other factor that is going on is that we have a resolution that has amended our quorum due to COVID and the current COVID-19 issues to only be a physical quorum of 10. We've gotten used to doing it online and being hybrid. We've talked about it in the past, but obviously we're still having issues with that because we can't even get 10 people here. And we're only meeting every other month as a board. So I think and I believe moving into, and we can have further discussion as a board, but moving into the next year, the resolution is going to sunset as well, and we will have to discuss what kind of physical quorum it is. But it is in the charter that we are only going to have physical board meetings. So I just wanted to highlight that. So I will, and it's not on the agenda, probably because it gets missed sometimes. But I'm going to go ahead and open it up for do we have any public comment to start the meeting from anybody, either online or here?
I
Teresa
always
has
have
her-
comment.
I think Teresa has her hand up too.
Does Teresa have her hand up? Go ahead, Teresa.
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to suggest that we recognize or memorialize the fact that our colleague Mark Dufa passed this week. So I would just encourage us to just keep his family in our thoughts and prayers.
That was definitely on the top of, that was gonna be my public comment, and I'll go ahead and address that as this, chair of the CoC. For those that don't know, Mark Dufa pretty suddenly, passed away over I believe last weekend. There were some Facebook posts by his family. He had fallen ill. He was only 62 years old, I believe, but he was a large member of our continuum of care with Catholic Charities, and then moved on to family resource. But you know, he was a large member of the homeless services community and a CoC board member for a significant period of time, involved with Providers Council and a lot of other committees. So to Teresa's point, please keep your thoughts and prayers with him and his family. But we will do something as a CoC board to memorialize him and send well wishes to his family.
I was very involved. I actually used to work with Mark YMCA. Didn't realize it was the same Mark, and was always good with our kids and a strong supporter of our program.
Any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
I have a couple. So there's been a couple of media stories that have occurred in between the last board meeting and this one that I just wanted to highlight. One was I received a call from a reporter who wanted to do a particular story around housing challenges and a variety of things, and I of course agreed to that. And then he asked me a question right before he was getting ready to hang up the phone. He said, is there any other question you think I should be asking you, or anything else that you would like to say, right? Which was a fantastic question, right? With 2 seconds left in the interview, right? And I said, well, actually, yes. I would like to also point out and or address that I am losing staff because they can't afford to live in Pinellas County. And I have staff who are currently living out of their cars and living homeless. And I think that should be a story, or at least incorporated into this story, because we now have staff who are becoming the client. He was very, very interested in that. He was alarmed and shocked, and as if he had never heard that was even a possibility. It then was on the front page of the Sunday paper. I don't know if anybody saw it, but it was one of my staff members was willing to. He asked if there would be a staff who might be willing to talk about it, and I said there may be. And in fact, there was a staff person who was willing to have that conversation. The reason I point that out is because if you had a chance to read, I believe the presentation that is going to be provided to us today on the point in time, the researcher or the person who did that report speaks very eloquently about this very issue, talks about teachers and talks about other first responders. Who isn't listed in there, right, are mental health professionals and other nonprofit community providers, but I think it's assumed that is also who we are talking about. And so I just wanted to tie the two together, that in fact, the researcher or the person who did the report that we're gonna hear today points out what what is becoming in what he says in the report is that this is a problem that we are getting ready to have big problems with, because we're not ahead of it, and it's happening and unfolding. I feel like some of us have been trying to have this conversation, I mean, literally pre-pandemic for years. I'm sitting at this, not this very table, but at the table to say, right, we're not paying our staff enough. We aren't paying our staff enough because our funders won't allow us to pay our staff well enough. And we are robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so on and so forth. And we are expecting nonprofit professionals to work for $10 an hour. And then we get blamed for things like turnover, and then we get blamed for things like poor outcomes because of poor turnover, and so on and so on and so on. And now they're living in their cars. And so I just feel like we're not all, maybe in this room we are, but not all of us are on the same page, having the same conversation, talking about the same thing. And, you know, certain things have transpired recently where, you know, law enforcement, for example, has taken positions that they once contracted with Directions for Living to provide, allowing me to pay my staff $42,000 a year. And now they're going to take it in-house and pay their staff $98,000 a year. And the reason they took the contract from me was because of poor turnover. And it's like, well, if you allowed me to pay my staff $98,000 a year, which is what you've now budgeted to pay the staff person that you're hiring to do the exact same job that my staff did, I wouldn't have turnover either. And so I think if we start looking at the salaries that funders are paying their staff versus what funders are allowing nonprofits to pay their staff, at Funders Council, for example, I think we would start seeing some data that would help us understand the problem. But nonetheless, I just want to point out that we're going to have a presentation here today that speaks to this very issue. And I hope that we're tying all the pieces together.
And I appreciate that perfect segue to, do we have any more public, I see hands up? No, oh my God.
Well, can I, April,
Yes.
you said we're not having the same conversation, or what, in a nutshell, what conversation should we be having?
The value of the services and the people providing the services, we have undervalued, not devalued, undervalued the knowledge, skills, and abilities that it takes to get your hands around this problem. And we are trying to, solve the problem without adequate allocation of resources. And, I remember being at a meeting fairly recently. Chief Slaughter was there. Chief Slaughter from the city of Clearwater said, kind of under his breath to nobody in particular, but said something along the lines of, Pinellas County could solve this problem, but it's 400th on the priority list. If we moved it to the top 5 on the priority list, right, solving the problem that is homelessness, that if we wanted to solve the problem, we could. We are, everybody says we're resource rich, we're this, that, but it's 400th on the priority list. So that's what I would say, that we have under-resourced the problem in a variety of ways. The one I was talking about right now specifically is around what we want to pay staff, but there's a variety of ways where we've done that.
We'll go to
Teresa, it would be the top, that was the first.
Teresa, Michael, and then Trenia. What I see.
Thank you, Sean. Just a couple of comments related to what April said. I saw the article. I think that the issue, as we all know, of resolving homelessness goes not only to wages that can pay for housing, but also the increase in available housing for individuals. And the only other comment I would make is that I know as a funder, I know that there are city employees who are likewise homeless, and some of them are in fact living in their cars. That's one of the reasons why with some of our dollars that the city received through ARPA, a program was set up to try and address particularly those city employees who are required to live within St. Petersburg. There's a new rental assistance program if they make under $48,000 and are required to live in the city. There will be a rental assistance program to assist them. I just want to make it clear that the funders certainly hear the concerns of the providers, and we try and respond with the funding allocations that are given to us based on the budgets that we're provided. Some of us are strong advocates to try and address homelessness and to provide providers contracts to do that based on the parameters that we're given from our organization. But we hear you, and likewise, we have employees that are also suffering. Thank you.
I also, this is comments. I don't want to get too far down, but if you, again, hopefully somebody else walks into the door who's on the board so we can ratify this charter here. But part of the amendments to the charter is a CoC or a joint funders providers meeting annually. So we are taking steps as a CoC to get those conversations at least started, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. We understand that. Michael?
Yeah, so I've spoken about this a lot as well, and obviously with April and many others. And I'll wait for the presentation, but April, do you have a sense of us developing an action item on this where we can, I mean, Sean, that's great that we could get funders and providers council together, but, do we go something a little bit broader with, people who aren't specific to this board? I mean, maybe doing I don't want to do another collaborative lab, but we've got to do something where we bring the media, we bring funders, because I think that this goes back to even a little bit of the discussions we've had about safe harbor, as one of the reasons like where it would make sense for it to be contracted to a provider is our salaries and benefits are more in line in terms of how we do it. And certainly I'm not aware specifically of who's going to get paid $98,000 a year to do the same job as someone could get $45,000 a year. But we have to get on the same page. And I think that, we need to really spearhead an effort. And, April, I know, we were talking about doing a one-pager and going and speaking in front of city councils and county commissions, stuff like that. But this is a huge problem that needed to be addressed probably 5 years ago, and here's where we are. So I don't know, April, if you have something in mind specific to how do we start addressing this, and I'll wait to listen to the presentation.
I mean, I don't mean to cut April off, but this sounds like a providers council conversation, right? To formulate a strategy and then get the further CoC board. And I think we would be happy to listen to some strategies coming from the providers council at the board level to see what we can do, or at least make recommendations, policies. The one thing we can affect, and we have rank and review is the way we look at, because one of the rank and review kind of criteria is dollars per service, and I may be saying that wrong, but unit of service.
That's correct. The lowest bid,
Right.
right? It's like,
That's-
well, the way to get to those bids, right? That 90% of our costs are our staff. The only way to get to the lowest bid is to undercut how we're paying staff. We will take it on certainly as the providers council. I feel like, however, that it requires all of us. It is providers council, it is our policymakers, it is our funders, it is and I do think things like, editorial boards and, presentations in front of county commission and city commissions and those kinds of things. I do I do still in my heart believe that these quote unquote kind of mistakes are happening because people aren't putting the pieces together. They're not intentionally trying to do this to staff, but I think we have to help bring, and this presentation today, I think that helps that story beautifully. Because we have an independent person who's looked at the data and said, we have a tsunami that is heading for us. And I just want to make sure that we all understand that in this report, it says we have a tsunami. It's heading for us. The tsunami is heading for us. So there you have it.
We'll go to Trinia and then we'll jump in hopefully to the presentation. I think you're on mute. You got it?
Okay, great. Thank you so very much. April, I read that article and it really impressed upon me the need that we can do better. And I think when you find it in your own backyard, when you are a homeless provider and your staff find themselves in the same situation, it should really create some urgency among us to take a look at what we're doing, who our advocates are, and how strong our voice is for those who realize that this issue is not just about availability of housing and not just about workforce housing. It's about attainable housing, as I've heard many say. It's about the fact of affordability, and we shy away from it. And some things that we can do, and I'm saying seriously, we need to be clear about having a one-pager, and that could involve a funders council, the strategic planning committee, if you will, the providers committee. So we have a one-pager, and we take that one-pager, and those becomes our talking points at all city council meetings, at all governmental meetings, to say we have to do better. I think we need some political champions, because we have buried our heads in the sand. We really have, and not done the job that we can do. We've let the dollars dictate what we think is effective strategies, and we know that they're not. So I think it's time to just really take on our mission as seriously as we can by having that one pager, by having that press release. Look at the diversity on this board to say that our people are hurting and we're leaving some behind, and many are finding themselves, and you know the situation because you deal with it every day as providers, in the hotels, in the cars, in the vans. And when I go to Walmart as a retiree and see those families, children not in school either because of it, I know we're not doing our best job. And collectively we can. So I'm suggesting, yes, take it back to Funders Council, take it back to Strategic Planning Committee, but only to produce a press release and a one-pager so we can really be serious about advocating for these folks. If we don't do that, then what are we doing? We're not doing our best. And I think that's what needs to happen. And I think we need to solicit some political champions. I think this board should involve the business community, the workforce development community, so that we can really have a very strong voice, and that those voices can resonate till we get some policies changed, with funders recognizing that, you know, to remove funding because salaries don't lend themselves to the kind of staff retention that we hope to see. And we know the value of staff retention. We can put those people in check as well to say this is unrealistic and it won't get us where we want to be as an organization. It won't allow us to fulfill our mission, and you become a barrier and not a supporter. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, you know, I saw a lot of heads nodding here in the room. I think it's pretty loud and clear the support you would have or do have at the board, CoC board level providers to bring something forward, a strategy or, you know, some sort of plan. I think funders obviously need to be involved in that conversation or part of that. And we'd look forward to seeing something brought, you know, from providers or whatever that looks like to the board, and we can take some action on it. Thank you.
The charter that I hope that we'd be able to approve today. actually, if you read some of the charter amendments, one of the charter amendments does in fact require funders and providers to meet twice a year. One of those would be coming up in the fall. And so this may be one of the first best, most relevant topics for that dual, group to tackle and to take on. So I'll just say that.
Thank you. We will go ahead and we're going to move on to the point in time analysis, which will then again inform all of this discussion. And I'll hand it over to Dr. Ray.
Hey, Sean, could you make one more plea for anyone online to show up in person if they possibly can?
Yes, or text somebody. The other thing I would say is I love the passion behind this discussion, but it doesn't happen if you don't show up in the room. And we need people here to affect some of the change we're talking about right now. We need one person, and nobody here is allowed to leave either. We'll lock the door. But yes, we need one person on the board to show up between now and an hour from now, so we can get this done.
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
The sheriff here, something to bring.
John, we have no idea who's in the room besides you and April. I see Avery. I mean, if I had an idea of who was in the room, I might be able to text someone and say, are you on your way to the CoC board meeting?
This is Ashley with HEP. I'm about 20 minutes away and I can head there now.
Great, thank you, Ashley.
We got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go on to the point time now. Thank you for your patience.
All right, thanks. Good to see you all today. And yeah, I have plenty to say about these issues. Hopefully it'll help. Kind of the first slide, please. Okay, so my main task, as I saw it, was we have the point in time data declining. However, that's in light of a housing crisis. So I had to reconcile that disconnect. And I'm going to talk about the different data points and steps that I used to reconcile that. And so that's kind of the main overall point. And I think in part, when you focus on the main set of data being point in time, someone could mistakenly say that housing is getting better because it went down. So you have to be able to communicate how the point in time data is helpful, but what its limitations are. And so that's what I'm going to try to do. All right, so we have that overall decline. Very helpful data throughout the years has been the school data, which has gone up each year. And I'll talk more about what that means. It shows that there's increasing homelessness pressures that aren't necessarily seen at the shelters. So I'll talk about that. The composition of unsheltered homeless in Pinellas, there's still an issue with veterans and foster care that I'd like to highlight. Pinellas has the largest veteran homeless population, and we need to continue to find ways to address that. Then, yeah, that's what I open with, and I'll talk about recommendations based on these findings. Next slide, please. All right, so we have this decline in HUD total over the years. Jail data has been pretty much flat. So there's not a, hasn't been a difference. There's that increase in school data each year. And I wanted to point out that school data only counts children. So if you have 4,600 children, they're all parts of families. So that probably represents 15,000 people, 20,000 people that are having difficulties. Next slide, please. All right, so here I'm trying to explain why the bit has gone down. And it's linked mainly to the emergency shelter and unsheltered data. So in the emergency shelter data shows this decline in the Pinellas safe harbor numbers. That's the largest contributor, and it's also declining. So that's why emergency shelter data declines. It's flat from 2020, 2022, because 8 shelters were added. So you have the added 8 shelters and the decline. So one issue with the PIT data is it's influenced by changes in shelter counts. It's not apples to apples every year. So that's an important mythological issue to understand. Next slide, please. So across all the other counts, you see the what I just talked about, how emergency shelters were flat because of the increased number of shelters, which is in response to need. But that's balanced out by the safe harbor. I was also, there's a helpful comment on the first draft that COVID might have influenced the drop from 2020 to 2022 as well, in safe harbor number. Safe haven data pretty much flat. Transitional data went down, but that's because of potentially changes in the number of places that are classified as transitional housing. And as they move to classifications that are outside the bit, they're not counted. Such as rapid rehousing or other forms of service. The unsheltered count, it's good to see that it has gone down. I think that's likely because of efforts of all for diversion services and the like to get that number down. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So by location, you see the unsheltered number has gone down in both Clearwater and St. Petersburg. So it's evident across the county. It's not just restricted to one place. Because the Clearwater number dropped more from 2020 to 2022, St. Pete has a higher relative proportion, but the reason why in 2022 relative to 2020, that's because Clearwater dropped more. Next slide, please. And we continue to see both by the HUD data and school data that the issue of homelessness in Pinellas County is felt more in the African American population. There's a higher number of African American individuals having housing difficulties relative to what their prevalence is in the county. Next slide, please. Right, veterans. So at the bottom, here's highlighted, there's 81 veterans. It's kind of cut off, but so there's still, even though that number has declined, consistent with the overall decline in unsheltered homeless individuals, it's still, there's 81 veterans that we counted this year. The number of people who were previously in foster care that are now unsheltered has also declined, but the percentage has stayed the same, because once again, it's proportional to the overall decline. It's not because we've been more effective than in previous years in helping to reduce that number. Next slide, please. Right, so the HUD data shows very few children, which is positive. But then when you look at the school data, you have a much higher number of children that were not only experiencing housing difficulties, but they were unaccompanied. So this might be older teenagers who report not being with an adult, and that number is fairly high. So the HUD data regarding that sample looks very good, but the school data shows that those types of late teens might be unsheltered in a fairly sizable number. Next slide, please. So, as broader context, the Council on Homelessness annual report is required reading for everyone in this room. It's very helpful. And off the top, let me state that one of the specific recommendations of the council was to add funding to support people working in homelessness coalitions, because they recognized that that's not just a Pinellas issue, it's statewide. Whether that funding has reached folks or not is perhaps a different issue. But as I was listening to the discussion, they're at least aware of it on a state level. And they talk about the housing crisis that's existing. So my concern this year was that you not only had the problems we've always faced with low income individuals, but we all know there's a massive spike in home costs, and that's been driven by a flood of money that was made available, and prices were driven up across the nation in the past 2 years. So whereas in 2008, there was a issue of high risk mortgages, the issue this time is likely Fed liquidity that caused folks with more money to purchase houses for, as businesses. And that pushed out all of your first-time home buyers, your people who work for the CoC, your teachers, people who aren't wealthy investors. Those are recognized by St. Petersburg in the most recent report I read issued by St. Pete. The investor market share is growing exponentially. So I know they're aware of it. And I have to state in this report that it had been growing steadily for 10 years, as you felt, but it just spiked massively to completely distort what people could afford. And so that's kind of the data underlying that. Next slide, please. All right. So the good news for me is that this these housing pressures, but the bid data indicate it hasn't yet showed up in the unsheltered count. However, I look at the 15,000 people in Los Angeles who are on the streets. I look at much higher numbers in other cities, and that I believe can occur, but we've just felt the shock. So I want you to know, although unsheltered homelessness has gone down, I'm not at all confident that I can be sure that'll be the case next year. Slow data and witness data from this alliance show that the pressures increase. Now, importantly, the school data is not the HUD definition. It's not people who show up to shelters. It's not folks who are on the street. It's mostly folks who are finding other ways to manage housing costs. They're mostly doubled up or going to hotels or doing the other things that people do that don't show up in the HUD count, but those are also clear indicators of what the housing pressures are doing. And then further, I wanted to see, despite the fact that emergency shelter number has stayed the same, transitional has gone down a little bit, there's a limit on what the bid can show, because there's a limit on the number of spots available. So we have a lot of people who are on waiting lists to get help that can't get help yet because there's not enough space for them. So that person on the waiting list is doubled up. They're in a hotel. They're doing something else to deal with the pressures. But it doesn't mean they can benefit tremendously from further supports. And then basically the person at the median income in Pinellas County is housing cost burdened. So it was difficult for me to find updated information as of this month. And I think that's part of difficulty. I had to kind of search high and low for data points that are current. So the this housing alliance, St. Pete and others quoted data showing how strong housing pressures were in terms of housing cost burden as of 2020, because that's the most recent reports that are there. So if it was strong then, what is it now? So as a proxy, I took the median income, then you take housing costs, you match them up, and you have a housing cost burden at that median income level. So these are your teachers, healthcare workers, CoC workers, the other individual mentioned workers for the city. All these individuals will feel pressures. I followed the teacher shortage in Pinellas and across the nation. Part of that is because they can't afford to live in these cities. So again, I couldn't find a number that says how many people are leaving Pinellas County, but that has to be part of the equation. They can't afford to live here to teach, so they move. But again, I apologize not having a number, but that's part of the problem. I don't know how many, but it's evident because the teachers aren't there, and it's evident. I believe it will be recently evident across all these professions where people are not making enough to meet housing costs, and then these pressures they're hurting median income workers, people at the low income. My fear is that they can wind up unsheltered and on the streets. I think that diversion, finding creative ways to have doubled up housing such are working, but for now, I'm not sure how long that. And then also thought that I'm unsure. So we have 650 unsheltered individuals. I found our research that talked about specific ways that unsheltered folks may not want to go to a shelter. I wouldn't just take a guess, but I'm glad I found research that said some may think shelters are unsafe. They may have pets and they can't bring their pet, or they may have a bond with people who live unsheltered on the streets. So I list in the report different reasons why you all could have very well come up to them and offered services. but they didn't accept it. So it might be helpful to ask questions. What is preventing those folks from receiving services? And if we know more about that, maybe we can create a pet friendly shelter or some creative way of addressing what those issues might be. Next slide, please. All right, so let me just reiterate these topics. The bid doesn't represent all the ways individuals respond to housing pressures. I've talked about that. There should be a plan to address shortages of professionals. And I think as far as what the plan should be, I can only read the almost the state recommendations, what you all are doing. And I know that, for instance, for professionals, you can offer subsidized housing, but that's your area of expertise. To kind of find what the best remedies are. They also depend on funding. So I wish I could guide you more, but my job with the bid is mostly to describe what the data are saying and to highlight the size of these issues to potentially handle off these difficulties moving forward, both for professionals and for people that may wind up on the streets at the lower income levels. And then finally, I mean, it walk me to help folks who offer services but not receive them. And I wanted to finally highlight those issues of veterans and former foster care folks who are in foster care, because all those numbers are declining. They're declining at a rate consistent with overall decline. Those are still issues that have yet to be fully solved. So thank you all. If there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. You do such great work. Really
Thank you.
appreciate the quality and depth of your explanation for each of the data points. So we know the limitations and really gave us a great perspective. I also want to point out within schools, just as you did already mention, that the definition is slightly different than HUD, but also to point out that our enrollment has declined. So even while our number of students, so the percentage has doubled in the
Yes.
past couple of years. So we were around, well, and I don't want to misstate it, but about 2%, and now we're a little above 4% of our population. So that's substantial, right? To have the population double percentage wise. So while the number of the students who are housing insecure in all, if it's not the HUD definition, Kenny Minto definition, not showing up to school ready to learn potentially because of the situation they are finding themselves in. And so it has doubled. So that, just to emphasize that also, and as you said, with teachers, and not just our teachers on the teacher contract, but even though we're at 15 now, all of the school board employees, as the largest employer in the county, we're seeing issues with folks unable to find affordable housing, who, for our bus drivers, our cafeteria workers, our plant operators, and other
Yeah.
employees in the district. Not, I know you mentioned teachers, but it's all employees.
True. Let me just add on to that. I looked at the learning outcomes for these students, and they're even poorer than when you compare them to other students who qualify for free lunch. So, and it's due to both the mobility of these students and all the other pressures of poverty, housing insecurity. So it's being felt that in their learning outcomes. So when that number doubles, you're having, it's twice as much of the poorest learning outcomes.
And we've added it to our, it's something we're monitoring now in terms of just the disaggregate for homeless in student achievement data.
Yes,
It's incorporated as one of our measures in our strategic plan
yeah,
now, so it's definitely something that is available and could be illustrated. It's also on the state department school grade, when you look at individual schools and the disaggregate and what used to be called different subgroups for what was the all No Child Left Behind
yes,
piece. So one of the subgroups now in that, a few pages in to each school, but it also incorporates if there's more than 10 students in the school who are qualifying. So that's not to say, I mean, there's still limited funding through McKinney-Vento for that, and a lot of it goes for transportation, but there are initiatives and
Yeah.
worked on it, so it's something that's monitored, but it's an entire community problem. So anyway, I just didn't want it to go unnoticed that it's
Sure.
been that substantial and keep
Yeah.
bringing it up. It's constantly on the forefront, but it's not, it's like other things when there's 400 things, so making sure it's at the top.
And that, just to that point, that to really look at the data, we have to really understand the data, we have to understand all of the data points, right? The number of people who have left, then therefore making that percentage number go up, right? Even one of the recent stories that was in the media, right, where we had a family living in hotel, 5 kids. The media did a beautiful job with it, and a viewer saw it and said, "I'll take the voucher." And so that entire family has now moved to, I believe, Pasco County or some other county, but they've left Pinellas County schools. They were 5 children they were forced to leave Pinellas County schools because the only place to be safely, affordably housed with their voucher was
Yeah.
in another part of the state. And so some of those things, right, we have to understand. I just want to say a couple things. One, I would like to, Brianna, if somebody could get us the Florida Council on Homelessness annual report that was referenced, that it was strongly recommended that we all read. I would like us to have that. I do think that, some of the things that were pointed out in this report, I really wish we could have included in the 15-page plan that we've all just been working on, that there was some synergy. If there's any way we can take some of this and put it into that, because that 15-page plan is a document that's important to all of us. We've done a lot of work on that. This data and kind of the observations of this data could be very helpful there. The one thing that wasn't pointed out here, probably due to lack of time, thank you so much, Teresa, for getting here, is that I hope that everybody reads this full report. If you haven't already, I hope that you will read it. I hope that you will print it. I hope that you'll take highlighters to it. One of the things that that is in this report that we didn't get to talk about are the number of people who are living homeless, who were born and raised in Pinellas County. That fact was pointed out at the last time we did I think an annual report or something. It might have been a year or two ago. And we pointed that out. I was born and raised in Pinellas County. To me, it is something that we need to truly pay attention to is the number of people that were born and raised here who are living on the streets. And it's articulated beautifully in this report. So I think we should pay attention to that. And then finally, around Safe Harbor and Safe Harbor numbers and some of these emergency shelter numbers. One of the things that came out that I think is pretty well done in the 15-page plan, but some of this data might support that, is that the numbers are going down. The numbers have gone down rather substantially at Safe Harbor. That could have been influenced by COVID and capacity issues and those kinds of things. But some of the feedback that we're actually getting, back to asking the question, right, which you said that we need to be asking the question, why aren't you willing to go to shelter, right? Why aren't you willing to go? What would help you be able to go?
Yes.
Well, in fact, people with lived experience have answered that question, and we are ignoring it. By the way, we are ignoring it. We've got entire groups trying to do all kinds of things with Safe Harbor, but we aren't including the voice of the people that we're asking the question of, which is, why don't you? What would help you, right? And they've been very clear. It is run by the police. We do not want to go to a shelter run by the police.
Sure.
And they are very, very clear. And so I would encourage all of us, right, to sit in some of those meetings when we are including the voice of people and we are asking the question that you have asked us to ask them. And what they are saying to us is, I don't want to go there because it is run by the police. And then they give us 700 examples of why they don't want to go there. And yet we have entire groups right now trying to fund Safe Harbor. And I'm trying to figure out how So I just think this report and the 15-page report that people have been working really, really hard on, right, should become like the strategic plan or something. It's like, so I don't know that we don't need any more. We just put those two things together and we say, this is the strategic plan, and every one of us should be working on solving and resolving the issues that are right now here in front of us. I'm done.
Do you have any other comments?
Yeah, I want to know, I've heard a lot about first responders and who knows, it's like spies, it's like who are becoming teachers with the Florida government's plan. And I just want to know if we have any information about housing insecurities for that particular group, and if they're still cops and firemen and doing these teaching jobs, and is there a double salary? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, I'll direct you to our school board member.
And there, I would assume, and I can't speak to each individual circumstances, that if you're retired from a certain field or group, then you are receiving retirement, your pension or whatever your benefits are from your retirement, depending on the terms of service.
But they're
I will
volunteers.
say, no,
No.
it's another way. We have transition to teaching where people can get certification to become teachers, even if they did not receive a degree in the field of education. And it was given a lot of press, but truth be told, we don't have a lot of people who are signing up to become teachers. There's not a lot of people going to college to become teachers, nor are there a lot of people transitioning to the field of education to become teachers. But opening up this as another way, they're not volunteers. They're people who had prior experiences as military or police or firefighters or veterans of those professions, But there are a lot of people who are veterans of numerous different professions who come into the area of education. So it really didn't change it. It really didn't, it was very performative, but not very impactful. So, they could have already done that. If you have a college degree, you could have already become a teacher if you had been a veteran. So it expanded it maybe publicly to get people more aware, maybe get people involved. But I would not see it as detrimental because it potentially is offering more people an opportunity to become educators. And I think, some of those prior experiences in terms of classroom management could be beneficial. Just like if you had prior experience managing a restaurant and then became a teacher, those are good prior leadership skills and management skills. So that whole thing really, I don't even think, I would have to confirm, but I don't know if we had anybody who transitioned to teaching through that methodology. So just like we have people who come from other states and are retired teachers from another state, and they're getting a retirement pension from New York, and then they decide to become a teacher here and get a full salary here, that happens too. So, I mean, there are a number of people who are retired and then go into the field of education.
So, this conversation and kind of the broader conversation, GW's point of what we kind of term the missing middle housing or whatever, your teacher, firefighter, EMS. The Florida Chamber of Commerce tracked this statistic, and I just pulled it up, of net income migration into Florida. There's, according to them, there's $2.7 million of net income coming into the state of Florida every hour. Every hour. So when you look at like the housing market, and can this get worse, and our nonprofit sector not being able to live, we're seeing retired teachers come down, or whatever that looks like, from, and most of it is coming from New York, Pennsylvania, Illinois, moving in to here. But when you look at $2.7 million of net income per hour moving into the state, that, and most of it is going towards the coastlines, right? They're coming here, they're going down South Florida, some to Orlando, but they're not necessarily going to the middle of the state or the panhandle. This number last year was like 1.9. So we're seeing more and more inflows. So that just kind of goes to, is this going to get better? Is this going to get worse in the near term? It's probably going to get worse because we underbuilt housing, as we know, and property values, not only property, but land values are going through the roof. So even if we have a willing and able developer that's going to do, homelessness or affordable housing, they're priced out of the market, right? So,
Sean, can I also say, just for the minutes or just for the recording, because I think it goes without saying, but I just want to make sure that it's been said, and that is that if median income folks can't afford housing, low income folks are really in trouble. Because not only are low income folks really in trouble because of housing, but median income folks can't help because they now too have become the client. So I just want to make sure that I'm being clear that I don't want to take away from the people that we are missioned to serve, which are our very low income people, by having the conversation about median income people, the staff. I want to make sure I'm being understood that the median income people are not now more important than the low income people. That I want to make sure people understand what I'm saying, which is that if this is true for median income people, what is happening to our low income people? And I hope everybody's drawing like the same lines and conclusions about what it is that we're talking about. The second thing that I want to say, just for the record, is when we talk about children and the doubling of percentage of children who are being impacted by homelessness and all the other things that are outlined in this report, there is very reliable, beautifully done research on children who are homeless as children, and the likelihood of remaining homeless, having 4 or more incidences of homelessness throughout their lifetime, and becoming homeless and remaining homeless, chronically homeless as adults. And so if we see this doubling of percentages, right, we can see our future. We can see our future. And so I just want to make sure that we've connected those dots as well.
And some of that looked like it was in the data of, and I don't know if it was teased out fully, but one of the slides had, you know, were you formerly in foster care or formerly homeless, and that percentage, and I don't know what the normative percentage of homeless for the normative population is, but that percentage seemed significantly higher than what I would think would be the normal term of homelessness in this data here, like it's in there.
And also, you have to think of causal models. So folks who are stressed as children are going to be more likely to have mental health challenges, difficulties obtaining those issues, substance abuse issues, all the things that go along with having challenging childhoods that result in homelessness, but continued mental health difficulties, possible definite higher risk for substance use difficulties, and most of those problematic outcomes that go along with having challenges as children. So we could talk, and also it's so important to understand homelessness within the support for mental health, for physical health, to be able to avoid these correlated problematic outcomes. So just as you beautifully pointed out, there's that sustained pathway, and it's connected to all these different places where if you don't provide community mental health support, physical health support, you're going to have worse problems. So I'd encourage all the different agencies, public health, housing, everyone to focus on the individuals that are having difficulty. And the individuals have issues not only with housing, but in other problematic areas that must be addressed.
Yes, sir. And we'll give it a couple more minutes and then we have a quorum now and I don't want to lose that.
I just like to ask if the people who are setting the rents and the mortgages see their piece in contributing to homelessness. If there's some entity to shepherd cost and to regulate, it's like the price that people can charge, because a lot of people try to, I don't know, maybe establish peerage. So, you know, it's like you have to make, you know, it's like a 6.5 times as much as this arbitrary figure in order to lift you. Okay, and so these people are basically running free in terms of, you know, it's like creating homelessness. All right, and so there needs to be and then I hate the term itself, a regulatory entity that says, look, man, this is rent, okay? Up in here, okay? And so, it's like if you want to do it higher, you have to do it and Pascal. Something like that.
Yeah, that's, an issue. The other side will argue the free market determines these prices. So you have to work together with everyone to, I think, understanding that data is key. I don't necessarily think that someone doesn't have the right to retire from New York and buy a house here for an exorbitant price. If they want to do it, I'm not sure you could stop that. However, if that's what's occurring, what do we do about it? So you just have to work together. One of the possible solutions is rent control, but there are arguments on different sides that you'd have to work out.
Teresa?
Just gonna follow up on what Ray and both GW have said, and it speaks to me that there is a heightened need for advocacy, not only on the local level, but also on the state level. The issue of rent control certainly been coming up repeatedly in St. Petersburg. St. Pete Tenants Union has been before City Council numerous times, including yesterday, related to a number of issues regarding tenants' rights. Certainly, most of us know there's state law that prohibits how rent control can happen or not happen here in the state of Florida, as well as I know from the issues related to, well, the point is that there's advocacy is important, but the issue of folks becoming homeless involves a number of things, including workforce development. And we talk about increases of income. And I can tell you from that the issue of increasing the minimum wage to $15 has worked in many avenues here in our county and across our state. But I will tell you that also some of those safety net programs that are in place, when you reach that $15 an hour,
You don't qualify.
you don't qualify for them. I just saw my son experience that. He's recently released from 4 months, thank God, from prison. And has been employed as of yesterday, 90 days, met his probationary period. But there's an issue, a legal issue he wanted to address. He went to the legal aid agencies, and guess what?
He makes too much money.
He makes too much money at $15 an hour, so he doesn't qualify for that.
That's
He
right.
no longer qualifies for food stamps.
That's right.
So my point is that it's a complex issue
Yep.
that impacts, as Ray pointed out, that those that are homeless as children often become homeless as adults. I would say, as well as have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and incarceration as well. That we need to be advocating beyond just the general issue of housing and the lack of affordable housing. It's a bigger picture. And we really need, I hear folks before I even got here talking to council members, that's good. Talking to county commissioners, that's good. We got to start electing legislators that recognize the impact of some of the things, policies. That
That's
they
right.
put in place.
That's right.
Well, good thing we have an advocacy committee with the CoC, and we will, Sam, did you have something? And these are some of the issues that we're bringing to light and need to be brought to light through point in time count, through these discussions that we can then take an action, put some action to it as a CoC or a community. But thank you again for your diligent work, the point in time and the presentation and everything. And I'm going to recommend that we figure out some way to get this out to the broader community and have these larger community discussions outside of our CoC, because I think it's important. But thank you for being here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr.
Is there action required on that item?
I don't believe so.
Or is there an information action? Do we, is there a receipt?
Do we have to receive this?
You can approve it as the final report.
I'll seek a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed, by saying nay. Any no nays, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ashley and Teresa for coming down and giving us.
Thank God I didn't get a speeding ticket.
That we can't go this page for. Take up the collection pie. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to, we'll do the CoC charter and then we'll do rank and review, and then we'll do coordinated entry, and then we'll do the consent agenda. So we can get this stuff done. So the CoC charter was sent out a week ago. There was minor, just edits to language, just formatting and things like that. Nothing substantial that happened after our board attorney review, which that has been reviewed. Everything has been approved. This is coming from executive committee. There's a couple of highlights in here. I just want to point out the CoC membership will vote every 5 years on the charter. So that's a change that I think was supposed to be in there in the first place, but just didn't make it in. So every 5 years, our membership will vote on our charter, but in interim, our board votes on the charter. Let's see, what else do we have? We are we're adding a committee, and to April's previous point, and this is also a directive of HUD, but it's something that we need as a CoC, is that a lived experience committee. So that is now a standing committee of the CoC, or will be upon charter approval, and they will kind of, that committee will inform a lot of our decisions here at the board level. We've added a lot more flexibility into the membership of the committee and kind of the policies and procedures outside of regular committees to make it as flexible as possible, so people can participate regardless if they're a member of the CoC or show up to all the meetings. We need and want the input. The largest thing that's kind of weaved in throughout a couple of different areas of the charter is we have been operating under an interlocal agreement, and for those of you that have been on the board a while, you've heard this for many, many years. And this goes back to the HLB days. And there has been an interlocal agreement between the CoC and various municipalities that has basically necessitated our operation under the Sunshine Law. That has caused issues specifically during the pandemic of just getting quorum, and as you can see today, it also is, we've moved into the Zoom world, right? Or the physical or the virtual world of having meetings. I think a lot of people have been used to that and gotten very used to that over the past 2+ years. We have not been able to operate as such with such flexibility due to prohibitions in the Sunshine Law. The interlocal agreement is set to expire at the end of this month. I just want to be clear about that. We have not had any discussions as the CoC or the HLA, from my knowledge, with any of the municipalities that are assigned or a party to this interlocal agreement of continuing it or signing a new one. So that is going to sunset at the end of this month. Now, what that will allow us to do is not have to operate under the sunshine. But we have created various provisions in here in the charter that have us following the general mandate or provisions of sunshine law, which is transparency, communication, all of those kinds of things, which you can find in here. So, while sunshine does not allow for virtual meetings, we're going to allow for virtual meetings based upon the committee. So that'll be one change. That'll be a little bit easier operationally for us as a CoC. The board, we're still going to meet in person. We will address the quorum requirements probably our next board meeting, because we have a resolution right now that has reduced it. That will go back to 51% after that resolution, but we can then make a decision on the board of what we think a quorum will be. So I just want to be really, really clear about that. That the interlocal agreement will be sunsetting at the end of the month. We are not seeking to renew it. That does not mean that the signed municipalities or parties to that are not going to still participate in the CoC, that we're not welcoming their participation in the CoC, any of that. They are still members. Everything is going to go along. This was just something that was required at the time, and it's going back, I think, a decade. We feel that we can effectuate, what we need to do, and we've built the relationships with the municipalities to continue on all the work that we just talked about that needs to be done, and why it's so critically important for the community, our community as a whole, and each municipality who's at the table. But given that, we will not be operating under the laws of the sunshine, which have various mechanisms and enforcement and requirements. We will be operating under the general intent of being a transparent, open organization. I just, for the record, super clear about any, and Charlie, our attorney, can correct me if I said anything wrong. Mystery.
Well, as representing an agency that fully operates in sunshine, I do have a question related to one of the provisions in the sunshine is related to prohibited communications between board members. And I know that with a number of our government agencies having elected officials on this board, I have concerns that that's not supposed to be included in the charter. I think it's very important to protect our elected officials. They certainly have to comply with the sunshine law and their roles as elected officials. And I think that that should apply to this board as well. So that they're not only protected, but also those members of the board who are not from governmental entities are also complying with that rule. I think there's a very good reason why that's in the sunshine law, and I would suggest that it remain in the charter.
Yeah, I mean, I have opinions on that.
Can we deal with the proposed non-sunshine business with the charter and sort of like dispense with the changes that we need to, and then separately discuss what we need to do related to other things? I think that might make some of the discussion a little bit easier, because there are things in here like lived experience advisory committee and, other changes, and then we can figure out how we deal with the other sort of as two separate discussions. Is that possible?
Yeah, if you want to make a motion to move those provisions and set.
And it's a little complicated by
It
the
is.
fact that I'm not sure that what we're looking at has a couple of the revisions that the executive committee suggested. Because we made some changes to the lived experience advisory committee. And then one change that I had suggested in here, up on it's page 11 of the revised charter about removal of board members. The statement today is the removal will be automatic unless voted otherwise by the entire board. And I think we revised that to read more like the removal will be automatic unless voted otherwise by the board, the CoC Board of Directors. Calling something the entire board is confusing as to who has to vote on that.
Yeah, is this the most up to date, Brianna, from the last executive committee?
Yes, so. Last Friday, isn't it last Friday?
Thursday.
First.
Were we including, lived experience advisory on the CoC board?
There's reference to a person with lived experience. I don't know if it mentions from the advisory board, but Brianna, the edits are dated 6/28/22 on this document.
I think that's the edit down there. So we met at executive committee last Thursday when it was. Because some of this language needs to be cleaned up prior to our membership meeting at the end of the year. We only have one more meeting left. So we were getting this out, knowing that we would have a further discussion at the board level to finalize and clean up maybe some of the language. Or at least discuss some of the language. But the lived experience is new 100%, which is from our last committee meeting. And
because I think we changed some of the language around lived experience, like where it says the members shall establish written procedures. I think we changed that to may. Making it optional for that committee. And we had other things that said, there are certain requirements of committee members elsewhere in the charter about you have to be a member, or we have to have a certain number of members on a committee. We wanted to exempt that committee from that, although they're welcome to be members. The composition may change from time to time. And I think some of those items may be missing the set that's in the agenda.
well, then I would suggest
The version that I sent to Charlie last week after our executive committee meeting was the version that we changed, but I'm not sure why. That's my apologies, everyone.
You're not sure why, finish the sentence.
Not sure why it didn't send. The newest one. Yeah.
It was edited live. We were
Yeah, we
editing
did.
as we
And
did,
I
so
sent it
that's why I
right
was.
to
can you put it up on the screen?
And I think beyond those two changes, with the experience advisory committee and the removals, everything else is exactly like it went to the board.
So just so we're clear, there's two edits from all of the charter edits that in your board packet are different. One is the new lived experience advisory committee, which is on page 14 of the charter. The general intent of the committee is still the same, but we had we changed some language to make it more flexible, as I was stating, versus other committees. So, and if somebody can help me out from the executive committee.
Yeah.
We changed the shall to may. Basically, the lived experience advisory committee may establish written policies and procedures.
Right.
And then added the last sentence, struck what's currently in your packet, the last sentence, and added, however, at least one CoC board member should be in attendance each meeting. And that was to better make the connection between the CoC board and the lived experience advisory committee. Sam?
Yeah, and it looks like in the board packet too, the Lived Experience Advisory Committee has a dedicated seat on the CoC board, which I don't see in this.
We changed that because there was already,
Because there already is people with lived experience on the board.
Right, no, I understand that. I guess I thought the thought process of, it's interesting to me because for the, both providers and funders, those committees elect somebody to sit on their behalf on the board. And, there's a downside because it's less flexible, whereas you could just look at the whole world of providers and have providers on the board. But there's some strength that comes from the person who's the lived experience representative on the board, who's has to be engaged with the lived experience committee on it. It ties those conversations together in a strong way. So I guess I'd want to discuss that more fully in terms of whether that's flexibility that makes that the lived experience committee stronger or weaker.
Yeah, so we discussed this,
Yeah.
just so you know, that this was an ample part of the discussion. Which is why we, instead of making decisions for them, the idea was in our conversation was that, which is why it's here, right? They may establish written policies and procedures because we want that group to actually ping pong that very discussion. Is it restricting or is it more flexible, and actually have people, that group, come up with their own decision? But we do think that is one of the first decisions, right, that they will collectively need to make around, are they nominating a chair of them that then will become whatever, would become the person who then would represent them at the table, or do they still want that separate? So we did have that conversation rather robustly, quite frankly.
yeah, we had a lot of conversation versus, and that's why you see may versus shall, right? And creating that required structure that if it doesn't occur, or if they don't want it to occur, and they, then whereas providers and funders and like we're saying it needs to occur. So we had a lot of conversation versus may versus shall, honestly. So that point is definitely well taken. The other thing I would say that we had discussion around is, not wanting to, it could create a burden for attendance as well, because now you have 2 or 3 different things, and we really want the advisory committee to advise and not have the burden placed on it that we all sometimes have, and just the
A burden that would prevent.
right, because as soon as we start putting rules and things around that, then there's attendance and there's this and that, and it just becomes administratively more restrictive. And we were trying to be we're trying to be as flexible as we can with this language.
Because they weren't present, right, to participate in the
Exactly.
discussion. Right, so, I just want to point that out,
Yeah.
right, which
Yeah.
frustrated me then, it frustrates me now, right, which is
Yeah.
why, it is written the way it is, which is that, it will be one of the first orders of business for them as a group to inform, because otherwise we were just simply making the rules for them, which seemed counterproductive to what we're trying to accomplish. By having
And we
people-
hadn't even had a conversation, and we couldn't have a
Yes,
conversation. We couldn't have a conversation with the lived experience members of our current board who say like, would you, that might not even be an option for the current board members as well. So we were just trying to be as flexible as possible.
Wouldn't it be great that when it gets to the point that this board has more than just 1 or 2 folks with lived experience guiding this organization?
Yeah, that would be
That's the
amazing.
goal. Yeah, and I would like to say to that one of the discussion points around this committee, one of my discussion points around this committee, remains that, my concern, and concern might be too strong of a word, but my concern about a separate committee is that where the work happens, right, is in all of the committees. And that the majority and or certainly the voice of people with lived experience should be in all of those committees, as opposed to a separate standalone committee. I get concerned about that. It's like, well, I think we need people with lived experience at DEI, at funders, at providers, that we aren't having somehow separate siloed conversations, because what we found, and staff can help me with this, what we found when we were here doing that 15-page plan, for example, is that there was such rich discussion about, well, this is the why it is this way. And then the individuals would be like, I never understood it that way. And so with that understanding, this other thing, it was just such a more rich conversation when both perspectives, so to speak, were present. And so I've been assured, right, that, and there's language in the charter somewhere else, I think in the beginning of the charter, about that we want people as a part of the lived experience group to also join committees and be a part of committees, so that we are addressing that very issue.
Can I say something?
Please.
It could have been, as Teresa said, like in the beginning, but the people who eventually got the money in the organization and didn't want to, wanted to hear from their own perspective what homelessness was, and how it was defined, and who it affected. Okay, and so they really didn't were suffering. You know, it's like experienced people who, you know, it's like we're going through it. You know, and even today, it's like I'm going to tell you that we spoke about the staff and everybody, you know, it's like and having a hard time. The people with lived experience, all right, are basically wanting to cling and stay in their spot, you know, because it took some of us a long time to get spots. And, you know, it's like, but people are struggling, and it's kind of like a dichotomy, because, well, I want to say, you know, it's like, it's about policy, but heck, you know, it's like, I have to go to Daystar and stand in line and do all that myself, you know, and so people don't really understand that, and there's just kind of like a disconnect about, you know, it's like, well, I'm gonna get in my car, go to McDonald's, drop off, whatever, you know, and so.
So when you read this language, what do you think?
What do I see?
Yeah, about the charter language about
I'm
lived experience advisory committee. Do you think that that captures what you are articulating to us right now?
I think people should, you know, it's like, try to understand a little more what, people with lived experiences are going through.
We agree. And so if you look, so what this charter is now putting in the charter, right, is I think speaks to what you're saying, which is that this is now saying that we are going to have an official advisory committee that is made up of virtually exclusively individuals with lived experience, for the very reason that you just articulated, right? And then in another place in the charter, it also says that we want people with lived experience, such as yourself and these others that we've been with recently, right, will also be members and or be free to attend these other committees.
Right, but then it's
Right,
it's pretty much the level that you're on.
yes,
So it's like, you don't want to attend a committee that's over your head,
right,
you know,
agreed.
but you know, it's like, who's going to make that decision? That's the question. It's like, so people have to be raised, and that's what I'm saying.
That's true. What I hope, GW, is that if this charter is approved as written today, that this committee, the Lived Experience Advisory Committee, will be a committee that you will take on, that you will, right, because you have been raised, right? And that you would be a very important person in this committee,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I've been doing it for.
a long time.
20 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Okay, since the beginning,
Mhm,
since they first started playing with the nation.
mhm.
But it's like, the thing about it is, I have never had, economic justice, never, okay? And I formed, so many committees, speakers bureaus, there's one national awards, this, but I'm still, it's like play in my pocket with quarters, okay?
So when you say there's never been economic justice, are you saying that you've never received compensation?
I've never received, basically compensation, and I've never received, it's like, equality perception, from my peers. Because people around this table have not considered themselves my peers.
I'll take exception with that.
Yeah,
I consider myself.
I'm just
I
saying,
consider myself some of your people. Come on.
I'm just saying,
I
Yeah.
okay, you can,
Yeah,
you can't tell me,
you know,
you can't tell me about how I.
You cannot, you cannot, you cannot.
And so that's, the head that people are coming in for it, and a little loud, a little brash, and a little, it's like feeling, well, do my measure. I'm just gonna take it, but, in terms of, money and, the holiday in for some weekends, or, I ain't had none of that. Okay, and so, and I've been just like 3/4 homeless during this whole thing. Okay, and I'm smart as you are,
Absolutely.
so, it's like, that's the change people are looking for. They're looking for relief, and they're looking for, well, I've done this, I've put my nose, to the right, so, I just got to do it. So, the ice cream.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different issues in what you had to say to us today. One, I think we are attempting anyway to move in the direction of addressing, right, through this committee and through some of the charter changes. But some of the other things that you've said around, we've prioritized compensating and doing some of these things for other people with lived experience, and we haven't done the same for you and or people who have been a part of this for the last 20 years, I think might be an issue we need to take, off this table, but I do think it's one we need to address. And I do think that the feedback around the way you feel, regardless of how we feel, the way you feel is one that needs discussion. If there are things that individually I am doing and or others are doing that are contributing to you feeling that you aren't one of us and you aren't a part of us and you aren't as smart of us or whatever, those things, right? We've got to do better than that. We've got to address that. I sincerely apologize to you,
Yeah,
GW, if I've ever done anything. I think it's a real issue, though, that we have to, as we move in this direction, that we have to be sensitive to those things because our intention is to, in fact, move some of these things. And so I think we do have to hear that. So I think there's a handful of things in there that we've got to, that we need to address, some of which are part of the charter and others are separate from the charter, but I do think we have to address them.
And hearing more from you about how to help others feel more included also. So they will feel, so folks will feel comfortable coming to committee meetings. I mean, we've had discussion about how hard it is to get there and, to be places or get the stuff on email, on the phone or, so, how. But from you, I mean, like hearing more.
Doctor, I understand that, it's like you want to be in the middle of the crowd. Okay, and just like, so it's a kind of equitable situation for, or safety and whatever. People can't. go through. And they think, I mean, the story is that, it's like, we're coming out here to get away from them. So they can't, it's like, come out here, So, it's like, we're kind of like dragging them in the deep waters of the trial.
So I will say, we had a lot of this
We had a
conversation.
discussion about this.
We had a lot of this conversation, which we're not the ones necessarily to be having this conversation, right, to your point. But, we talked about, and that's why we're trying to be as flexible as possible.
That's right.
We're like, we say, hey, we need people with lived experience feedback, but we're having we said this, we're having meetings in this office, like, if we had it at Safe Harbor, we'd get a lot of feedback, or if we had it at Foley or wherever, like, it's not that people don't want to give the feedback or can't give the feedback or aren't willing, like, it's date, time, location, all that kind of stuff that we have set up either intentionally or systematically or unintentionally for whatever amounts of reasons so we did have those kind of discussions on how, and that's why I think for this particular piece of language, we were trying to be as flexible as possible.
Yeah.
And, part of that was let the committee, whoever that membership may be, or whatever that looks like, decide date,
Where
time,
they're gonna
place,
meet.
location,
If it's the same people that have to be there, in other words, is it?
if they
the same
need
membership?
compensation, whatever,
Can
like.
it be flexible in terms of who's there, can the meeting change from, 1 month it's at one emergency shelter, or it's at Williams Park, or it's at this place. All of those things we did talk about. And from the perspective of, which is why we said may establish policies, right, around some of those things, not that the group has to, but they may consider that. And where they will meet, what time they will meet, all those kinds of things.
Because all the other committees, is like, you have to have a chair, you have to have a vice chair, you have to have a secretary, like, there's very structured kind of, which we thought could inhibit, not to say, like, if that's what the committee wants, they can by far establish it, but it's not us, it's they're owning. Whoever is a part of that committee is owning that committee and all of that, so that's where we were coming from. As the executive committee, when we had these discussions and ultimately passed this language up here.
I mean, you should, I'm gonna bring Jesus into it, but you should seek to be progressive in your life, whereas you're going to, once you set on a path, you should master that. It's like, and so people need to know things. They need to know how to do action items. They need to know how, it's like to, Robert's rules.
Exactly, and I think that's part of it.
And that will raise people.
Mhm.
And their self-esteem and the self-esteem of it. I mean, you could sit here with Robert's rules. I did in college. So, it's like, I actually was president of Black student in college. But the thing is that you could do Robert's rules and nobody would, as you're saying, and you can use Robert's rules as a weapon
Right.
to keep people.
Yeah.
And so that's how some people feel. You gotta know that. So,
Yeah, 100%. Well,
So
Sam,
back
did-
to something that Duggan said, though, about, because I do think that Teresa's raised an issue that I want Charlie to be able to speak
Yeah,
to.
that's what I was gonna say, is we have one other, and Sam brought up the initial discussion on this. It has your kind of concern, or you can vote however you want, but do you have any more questions, or do you need any more?
Yeah.
If Brandon has a charger in his office,
I think that's you, mute yourself.
So I think this might be out of order now, but maybe we deal with the committee first, but I think one of the other pieces that we should leave to the lived experience committee to determine is they should have provision to have representation in whatever way they think is best at the executive committee as well. There should be a seat at the executive committee designated for somebody with lived experience.
I'm open to that.
Yeah, I'm fine with
Yeah.
that. It's,
Or the board, or both.
I mean, the board has.
The board
lived
has-
experience, and then they're gonna make the decision about whether
Yes.
it comes from that committee
That's
or if
correct.
it comes separately.
they gotta be on the board though, they can't just be on the.
Do you have one? I think I probably have it.
If I'm understanding you, Sam, in whatever way that committee wants to have some type of input, membership, person can change every time, direct to the executive committee, whatever they decide that is, that's what we'll have.
Mhm.
And then, my only thing from a, and then Charlie could answer this, is how do we make sure that that does not impact, quorum
Mhm.
or other issues? Because it may rotate,
Ex officio.
but I think you're right, is that the invitation is always there. And however the committee wants to have that presence made, that's at the executive committee. Because you're right, at the board, there's in our charter, we talk about making sure that there's lived experience, but that's not required of the executive committee.
Yeah, and I guess the way I would make it a motion if we're at that point would be, because I think this committee piece looks good to me. That would be a separate motion to keep it like that. But I think in the component of this charter that defines the executive committee, it should say the one seat on the executive committee is designated for a person with lived experience to preserve maximum flexibility for the lived experience committee. That group can define how that representation is selected, and to reduce the burden on people with lived experience, the executive committee, the lived experience designee for the executive committee will not affect the quorum of the executive committee, but will have the right of voice and vote.
I second that, and we got it recorded, I hope.
Can we do that? Is my question.
That's. Ask Charlie.
Charlie,
Now we need to unmute him.
Charlie Gardas.
Yeah, hey. So, I've been listening, and I'm not sure if somebody could distill the question, to, can we do this or not? And fill in the blank as to what this is.
I'll try to give it a shot. So we are operationalizing a lived experience committee
Right.
of. The question is, can we create a space on the executive committee specifically that is not necessarily a board member of the CoC, but would then have the right to attend and vote at the executive committee level on CoC matter? I think,
And would not affect the quorum.
and would not affect quorum of
the
the executive committee.
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say no to the last part. I mean, if you're going to include them in the committee, they're going to have to be counted for quorum. I'm not aware of any way to, if they were a non-voting member, and kind of an ex officio member who participated in deliberations and discussions but had no vote, then yeah, you could excuse them from the quorum calculation. But if they are a full-fledged, equal dignity executive committee member, they need to be counted in the quorum calculation. I don't see any way of getting around that. The question about whether you can, construct the executive committee with a member that is not a board member, and therefore wouldn't typically fit the definition of executive, quote unquote. I believe, yes, you certainly can do that. I think you have the authority and discretion to construct and structure the executive committee any way you want. But in, if that lived experience member is going to be a full dignity member, they need to be counted in the quorum calculation. And the only way that they wouldn't be counted is if they're not a full dignity member.
And could we, does it have to be the same person designated, or could it be a designee, a representative of the committee?
I think the language could say any member of the lived experience committee. So that way, whoever could show up could show up. A designated member from the lived experience committee, and that designated member can change from month to month or meeting to meeting.
Is it possible to, I don't know, but to have a dynamic quorum for that that's spelled out that, if it's today is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 members, I think. That it be, the total is 6. But if there's a person, the representative from the Lived Experience Advisory Committee at 7, is the total, and you need, or you could just define what the quorum is under the executive committee language. So if they're not present, it's 1. If they are present, it's another. So their vote counts if they're there. It doesn't if they're not.
I've never seen it done that way, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. I don't know the answer to that hypothetical. I don't know the answer. I'd have to look into it. I've never seen it done that way, but that doesn't mean it's because, it can't be done. I can't answer the hypothetical without doing a little research.
We leave some space, because then again, we're doing the same thing we talked about in the executive committee meeting.
My gut reaction is you could do that with any member of the committee. It just seems to be a little bit too flexible. But anyway, I'd have to look into it.
What if we had them as an ex officio for the first year? This is the first year we're trying, having this new committee. And we certainly have every intention of weighing input and considering input when voting. And with the intention of, if the attendance is consistent, there's not an issue, then they're part of the quorum.
This is, I'll just tell you my opinion, and I appreciate this is going down the same road where we're creating, like, my opinion, let's create the committee, let's convene the committee, let's have the committee decide. And, obviously the board is on board with having that committee, either at whatever that looks like, whatever involvement they want. There's some work that has to be done clearly, language wise and charter wise, that I don't think we're going to be able to necessarily hammer out here today, but we've created the space. I think we've created the space to allow for that to happen, but we need to create the committee first, convene the committee, and then get the feedback, and then we can take the further action that is needed. And I don't think either one of you are going to let us just not do that, or the executive committee is not going to let us do that either. So that would be my kind of path forward right now, then to try to get into all this language for something that the committee may not even want.
To me, that sounds like a common sense solution to your immediate issue. Stand up the committee, like you said, because it's going to be brand new. You're going to have to stand up the committee and get it kind of stabilized, and then work on adding a designate to the executive committee.
Does that sound fair?
it sounds fair. I guess I would say if GW wanted to, he should have a seat on the executive committee next time they meet. Because he's already a member of the board and has experience. And that can be a place to be revisited once the committee's up and moving. And obviously, if GW doesn't want to do it, then that's fine too. But I just, getting any group up and running takes a long time. And I want that conversation to be full, intentional, and well had. But I don't want that to substitute for an immediate solution to having influence at every part of the board's function. And while all the committees, especially providers and funders, are really important, the executive committee takes a lot of action on behalf of this board, for which I'm enormously grateful, so that we can be a little more nimble. But not having lived experience there is a real flaw.
So then we could, and I'm trying to find it, sorry, we could add just a line that the lived experience member of the board shall have a seat at the, but that's for us, for me, as the chair of the CoC, and going to all these meetings, it becomes a quorum issue. Which maybe be a little bit more relaxed with not, potentially getting out of some of the sunshine regulations. But as we see today, so if we're gonna have that seat, we're gonna have somebody who can make the meetings and commit it, or vice versa, we're gonna have to change our executive committee meeting date, place, time.
And it may become a non-issue if we're gonna do some changes to committees after the interlocal expires. Because that would allow other means of attendance counting to a quorum. But the way it reads in the charter today, under members of the board as a whole, we say homeless or formerly homeless, we have two positions. We don't refer to them as lived experience, but that's how it is in there, and you could add that to the executive committee to say that a member of the board from the one of those two designated seats is also a member of the executive committee.
Okay, so under the executive committee, it says act on behalf of the board when necessary. All decisions made by executive committee are brought to the next board meeting for ratification. When board is unable to meet in various time sensitive issues, members of the executive committee will include chair, vice chair, immediate past chair, secretary, funders council, providers council, period. We can,
and one of the two members of the board who occupies the homeless / formerly homeless seat, or is elected to that seat. I guess elected is the way charter.
And that's good too, but remember, we had part of our conversation. So we have homeless, formerly homeless, and we have lived experience, and April brought up discussion of lived experience as in.
I think for the purposes of this board, because it's defined already as homeless or formerly homeless,
Okay.
we just keep it at that, and then we can work on those issues,
Refining it.
yeah,
Okay,
because that's how it's defined here.
I would suggest changing the word one to either. So that way, they both could come.
They have to be elected and won.
Well, how many are there now? Just me, right?
Well, right,
How many seats are available to that category?
available, are they both filled, or one is.
Okay, then leave it one. I'm sorry. I thought there was two.
Could be two, there
I
may be.
think
by
there are
then.
two.
When
There
North
are
County-
two. I'm the other one.
Okay,
All right,
okay. Then I would say either and either, so that gives them flexibility. If one can't make it, the other one can.
okay, well, we still have a lot of business to take care of. We're good with that part. Duggan, we had another change on the board attendance.
Yeah, that would
Removal.
be page 11, it's 11 in the pack, well, 11 of the charter in the packet. Under removal, it says the removal will be automatic unless voted otherwise by the entire board. I think that needs to be changed to unless voted otherwise by the CoC Board of Directors. Just strike the word entire.
That's what, we have in
That's the one as it is on the screen, yes, that's how it should be.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I wonder if it's worth having in the charter that states explicitly that there's some outreach to people who have attendance problems. I bet we do that informally, but if we're thinking about how to include more people in these discussions, we have to be proactively inclusive, and that means HLA doing some really good troubleshooting about what is it that's generating attendance problems, what are the barriers to attendance, and how can we work together to address them.
I mean, honestly, we're meeting every other month, so that would be half. We only meet 6 times a year.
Sure, so I totally hear you.
So-
I just don't wanna leave it so that you have somebody who's missed a meeting and maybe missed 2 committee meetings, and you start worrying about, are we gonna have to remove them? We need to be having those conversations early and with a view toward solutions.
I concur with what he's just said, because, I've staffed a number of committees for the city, and I think it's always prudent to reach out to a person that's having attendance problems to see if they're still interested in serving, and if there may be some extenuating reasons why they're not attending meetings.
This is
Make
where,
this Just the board.
Yeah, this is
not
not
the
committee. This is just the board.
That's the board, and I mean, you're already saying you're only meeting 6 times a year, you're gonna make it where you're to participate virtually or in person. If someone's missing meetings, there may be a real reason why they're missing meetings.
Yeah, but I think there's a difference between some of the seats, because we've gone through this with other seats, especially the formerly homeless seat, where a lot more flexible because things have changed. However, everybody on this board is on the board for a reason. Mostly a volunteer appointed, so there's so on and stuff. We're all adults. Like, if you're having an issue, you need to let us know. I'm with you on, let's do some outreach. Let's try to keep people engaged, but there's only so much we can do. And you hear all these other committee meetings, everything else going on. So I think we've always struggled with attendance with this board since I've been on it, of people just coming, not coming, and do we get them off, or what do we do with them? Do we reach out? A lot of the attendance issues typically is with elected officials who are appointed to the board. And the only thing we can do in that case is send a letter to the chair or whomever and ask for another appointment there. But, I think.
well, and realistically, and if Amy were here, right, she would be speaking to this. We are doing all of those things. It's not articulated in this language right here. And that was intentional, by the way, that all of that wasn't articulated in here, because what has actually been happening is the reverse of your concern, which is that we have allowed it to go on and on and on and on and on and on. And despite our outreach efforts, nothing has changed, and we continue to be in a quorum issue. So, and I can speak for Providers Council in particular. Everybody wants a seat at the Providers Council, and then they don't show up. And we beg, and then we can't hold a meeting, just like today, and take action on things that I personally have been working on for 20 hours this past month, and we can't take action on it. So we're trying to find a happy medium, but in practice, this outreach business that you're talking about has been excessive and obnoxious and resulting in nothing. And so here we sit. And so begging people to get here. So, I have to say that, sure, we need to find a happy medium, but just so everybody's clear, we've been doing that and getting nowhere.
A question about the elected officials, do they all have a proxy designated? And I ask that because today, I didn't know until I reached out to I saw our council member on the weekly schedule was scheduled to be here. I did not know until y'all started talking about a quorum issue. I reached out to her legislative aide and found out she was at another meeting as the proxy for the mayor. And so I said to her aide, anytime you know that she cannot attend, I'm her proxy, let me know so that I can go on her behalf. I don't know if that exists for other elected officials, if they have designated a proxy,
No.
since I heard that.
Because it wasn't allowed, initially, that wasn't allowed per the charter, just so you know, it wasn't allowed per the charter. That there could be a proxy or a designee.
But it is allowed now.
And it is allowed now.
Okay, so maybe that to deal with what Sean implied, there is an issue with.
Okay, will you pull that up?
There, I don't think
We
we
have
have, I think
all-
we allow proxies in a couple situations.
We allow alternates.
Right.
Or whatever.
What's the difference?
I'm
Maybe-
here,
maybe that's
I'm
what-
trying to make y'all have a quorum now, I'm not supposed to be here, let me down.
We're
But
gonna
I
do
know that the application that came in that was just submitted for our membership, they had them identify a proxy and I was identified as such.
And I think that's for membership, not for the board.
So then maybe I didn't need to fly out here. But
But that
so,
could be potentially something to add,
But I,
exactly.
yes,
especially in real life.
Mm, so maybe I shouldn't even be voting.
So this is probably something else we need to get our hands around because we do allow alternates. If you look at the attendance, Daniel Thomas is an alternate for Mr. Lundy. We have appointed, but at one point was an alternate. We have an alternate for the sheriff. We've had an alternate for the public defender. I'm just going off the top of my head. I don't know if we've ever really allowed alternates for elected officials, but then I don't know what the difference would be between the public defender or sheriff's office and an elected official.
They're elected.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what the difference would be. Like, why would we allow for one and not the other or vice versa? That doesn't make any sense to me. You could make a constitutional officer argument, which would be,
It's sort of interesting to me,
It
if an elected, if I'm an alternate, meaning that I, for her membership. And in fact, I'm her when she's not there and she's serving on the board. Am I still not her when she's not there? I don't know. I'm no attorney.
You can't be both at once.
I came out here to try and help. Now I'm questioning.
No, I'm just saying you can't be both at once.
What do you mean, Charlie? That comment doesn't, I don't understand.
In fact,
Well, you can't be attending as a board member and then be attending as a delegate for a board member. You're one or the other.
Only count once.
Yeah,
She's on.
but she's only counting once. But
Yeah.
Right.
If the elected official is here, they would be the one to vote. If they are not here. then-
Exactly. That's what I meant. That's what I meant.
I don't see anything in the charter that deals with it. But
I think that would be particularly helpful though, because there's often turnover and having been an elected person who served on this committee or this board for, I think, my whole term. There's a lot to learn. So I mean, having an alternate is very valuable because it's typically a staff member who's the alternate. And they're gonna have
More
the-
knowledgeable about what's
who
going
have
Yeah,
a
and
lot more knowledge. and
I would
ability.
say that's not the intent or purpose of what we're
So,
doing.
I mean, that's really beneficial thing to ask. And then, you can both attend and ultimately the elected could do the vote, but then on the times the elected's not there, you still have the person there.
No, I mean, but if we, in my opinion, if we allow for that, then you will not have the elected official and you will have the staff member, which is not the intent of this board.
and I think the way that possibly we got some of these is there is language in here that said appointed entities, which are all of the, government entities. The appointed entities must appoint an individual designee to represent the appointed entity on the CoC board The appointment must be renewed by the submission of a vote of confidence on behalf of the appointed entity to the Pinellas CoC board. So I think that's where we got like people coming for different bodies. But that I think was meant to be sort of like a standing designee. It didn't have to be an elected official. If the city of St. Petersburg wanted to send someone else and appointed someone else, or the school board did that. You know, but it sort of would be lasting. I don't think the language reads in such a way that it could happen sort of like from meeting to meeting.
Which is exactly how it reads in Providers Council Chair, Providers Council as well, which is, it is never intended to be, as you know, is never intended to be, because these conversations are so dynamic and they often last month over month over month over month. People can't then be up to speed and properly weigh in and properly vote, you know what they're voting for kind of thing.
So I think that's how we got people that might look like a designee from a certain place, but they're well, for some of them have been consistent or semi-consistent.
Right.
And we did allow for proxy in membership and committee. So that I can see why that's confusing.
Might be helpful to talk about proxy or designee or something, like, I think at a different time.
Yeah.
Because there are different situations, you know, like, it's obvious to me, Teresa's on multiple committees, she's been around this for a long time, coming to the table, she knows what's going on. You know, that's different than someone who just, oh, I'm sending somebody because I need a body at the table, you know, like, and then they're not gonna come to any other meetings.
I think for the purposes of us right here, right now, today, I don't see anything that allows for it, unfortunately, for Teresa in Councilmember Big Sanders' spot, unless somebody else can point me to some other.
As long as you've got a quorum otherwise.
Yeah,
can
well, I think we
excuse
have
myself from the table.
and we, yeah, no, we appreciate it. And we'll have to, I think we'll have to clean up that language or address it at another time.
And I think there was a historical perspective related to why electeds were here. That came out of the previous governmental or whatever interlocal.
Yeah, that
agreement.
came out of the interlocal.
And the way it was structured and the government's basically funded the establishment of the organization. So, you know, I think that it should be, some thought should be given to whether the representative is in fact, based on what you said earlier, the elected or someone that's designated by the governmental entity to serve on.
And I think the interlocal agreement has the elected.
I'm pretty certain it does. That's where it came from.
Mariana.
Just because we've determined Teresa does not have a vote, we are exactly at quorum. I have a hard stop at 11:45 and then we have 2 votes.
Yeah, thank you. So we clean the language up. Let's, want to move a motion for this and then we can talk about sunshine for, I'll give it 5 minutes. And then we'll vote on
And
it.
the only thing I would say is you might want to look at your previous motion that I was second on. You have to redo that.
You second that? with
I
that?
seconded that last one.
All right, well, we'll pull that motion since it's not, what was it?
It was better. Yeah.
What were you saying about Robert's rules?
What was it? What was it? It was to receive the pay report as it is.
Yeah.
That was.
Oh, God, that was
Have a good weekend.
20 years ago.
Um,
Well, we'll do that at the end. We can do that at the end.
I'd like to, just say one big thing about this, I had to
Make it quick.
get some air. Issues are, security of children, okay? Are your kids gonna be taken away from you because you're living in an abandoned building? Access to knowledge of what's going on. I would suggest that there is a hard committee or a hard foundation of progressive advocacy. Okay, and maybe April or whoever, okay, could give us like a intern, people in terms of finding out, hey, you know, it's like, I can't clean my clothes, I can't, you know, so do this, who would know, have knowledge of where to find access to do certain things. And so that, you know, so it expands the lived experience group, because people are going to, well, I gotta call Rick roll, I gotta just like, find out about this, and I actually know about that. And so I don't have to make 6 calls to find out, you know, and so there has to be a hard advocacy and access, and people have to have that mentality, you know.
Agreed. That's why let's get through this charter. Let's set up that committee, and that could probably part of what maybe that committee wants to do, but we'll talk to them. Duggan, do you have a motion for me?
So, and I thought we had one, because Sam, your whole motion about executive committee membership, I seconded that. We went into discussion. I don't know if we solved that or not.
I think
Do you want to restate it, clean it up, withdraw it, clean it up?
We've already made the change. We've already made the change in the charter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. So we need to take action.
The change made in the charter definitely fits the intent of my motion.
There you go.
So move to.
So I'll
accept
leave that
language
change, the change that we wrote into the executive committee. I'll move that.
And the other,
And with the provisions that the lived experience committee figure out the right structure for that representation and how to do it.
and the board
And the
removal,
quorum and all that,
and the balance,
Changes.
and the balance of the
So the changes is recommended.
changes as recommended.
That sounds great. Yeah,
I'll second that, yes, there you go.
There are a couple of typos in there.
Yes.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, motion passes unanimously. We're still talking about sunshine provisions and things of that matter. I just, you know, we talk about bifurcating this conversation. I'm fine with what we have in this charter. If anybody has any other provisions they'd like to add, I'd recommend making a motion and we can discuss it. Then I would seek a motion to approve the remainder of.
I would make a motion to table the sunshine for our next, and since this is bifurcated, vote on the first portion. The discussion could be made, is that okay too?
I don't know, I mean, I would be opposed to that because we need to get this charter and I don't know why that just puts further limitations on us. But that's just me.
Well, I think if the charter sits as it is right now, I think till our next board meeting, we're okay. Just because there's a provision in there that says that the secretary takes minutes in accordance with Florida sunshine law, doesn't mean that we're necessarily subject to it once that ends. It's just a style of, and making sure that we do it appropriately.
That's right.
And then further discussion at our next meeting about what we want in terms of public access to minutes, meetings, and that kind of stuff. And it does still say somewhere in there that the meetings of the board are open to the public. You know, so I think tabling it and having a further discussion about what we want in terms of transparency after the closure of the interlocal is fine.
I do think that the opinion of Charlie should be shared maybe with the entire board, because this entire discussion was subject of Charlie's review. And he then sought second opinion by yet another expert in sunshine. And his opinion articulates all of these concerns, actually, which is to say that while it is sunsetting, we still are very sensitive to the intention of sunshine throughout the charter. And he speaks to that beautifully. So if we're going to table it, I do think that we should send out Charlie's opinion because it speaks to all of this. And then people would feel more comfortable perhaps on, for the sake of the vote.
I'd be glad to just share a summary of my conclusions and the opinion that I shared. First of all, the continuum of care is an organization that is authorized and whose validity arises out of federal law, not Florida law. The Hearth Act is the legislation that provides for the validity, the necessity, and the requirements of the continuum of care and how the continuum of care is set up. Now the interlocal agreement was a wonderful expression of the willingness and desire of several jurisdictions and government agencies to cooperate in the prevention and elimination of homelessness, but it was not required by, I would even go so far as to say, not recognized by the Hearth Act, which is the enabling legislation that the continuum of care operates under. So while the interlocal agreement was a very powerful expression of, yeah, we're all in this together, it was an unnecessary document. It was an unnecessary imposition of some conditions, specifically the public records laws of the state of Florida. The interlocal agreement is the document that imposed the public records laws, because that interlocal agreement said that the homeless leadership board, at the time it wasn't called the continuum of care, it was called the Homeless Leadership Board, would operate under the public records laws of the state of Florida. Now, since then, the Hearth Act has required a different structure. If you remember, Regina Kardash helped the continuum of care set up the compliant structure that includes the lead agency, the collaborative applicant, and the HMIS agency, all of which are now the HLA, the nonprofit entity created to comply with the Hearth Act structure. So the way that the continuum of care is structured now, with the lead agency and the collaborative applicant and the HMIS agency all being designated as the HLA, the interlocal agreement really becomes even more superfluous, more unnecessary, because the continuum of care has become compliant with the most recent HUD structure, the most recent Hearth Act structure that's required for continuum of cares across the country. And the interlocal agreement is, by its own terms, expiring on September 30th of this year. So I checked with Regina Kardash, who was the attorney that set up the compliance structure with the lead agency and the collaborative applicant. And she agrees that there's no necessity for the interlocal agreement. She even commented to me that at the time that the structure was set up to be compliant, the interlocal agreement was actually an obstacle and somewhat of a problem to compliance with the Hearth Act structure. So she thought it was a positive thing that the interlocal agreement was expiring.
Charlie, we gotta cut you off. We got 10 minutes and we have, you got 11:45?
So
We got more votes, so we've already, make a decision.
So let me just tell you that I've also consulted with Janine Williams, the city of St. Petersburg attorney, who does seminars and presents discussions on the sunshine laws. She's very well versed in the sunshine laws. I went over this with her. She agrees that upon the self-expiration of the interlocal agreement, that the sunshine laws would not be applicable. And in my opinion to the board, I said that I thought that the requirements that you have in there for publicly noticing meetings, for having minutes, for having the meetings open to the public, all of those accoutrements of a transparent and accountable organization were satisfactory, and that there was really, there's no need. Now, elected officials are only subject to the sunshine law when they're voting on something with the body that they're elected to.
Move on. I appreciate, we've got like 9 minutes and we still got some other stuff we need to do. So I need action from the board. We either table it or
I make the motion to approve the language as presented.
do I have a second?
Second.
This is for
The balance of the charter.
and I would just say to maybe amend that's effective October 1st.
Yeah.
Because there are changes in there. We don't want to get twisted up in the month of September, so to make it effective October 1.
Once it expires.
Do you,
I amended to make a motion to approve the language effective October 1st. Second.
all right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, motion passes unanimously. Rank and review. Coming from exec, make it quick.
Coming from executive committee, NOFO was released August 1. It is due September 30th. This is the first year in many years where we have had to reallocate funds. We were only allowed to put 95% of our APR annual renewal in tier 1. So that takes us from 5.3 million down to 5 million and some change. This year, very, very proud of review and rank and the scoring. We have done everything HUD asked for us. We made performance-based decisions. HUD requires that we look at 33% objective and 20% performance. For regular renewal, we were at 74% objective, 58% decisions were based on performance. So that is what you have in your packet. You have tier 1 and tier 2. For bonuses, we were allowed to apply for a domestic violence bonus and regular bonus this year. Therefore, if we are awarded the domestic violence bonus, just like in previous years, HUD will pull that out of the tier, bump everything up. So the scoring is based on performance, all with the exception of Brookwood. It was the decision of the review and rank committee, as well as the executive committee, to take a look at Brookwood, determined that it is the only youth serving program. That again is a very important point for HUD, that you made that decision. Additionally, the committees have looked at the system performance measures and the performance measures that we look at as a whole and found they don't feel that that speaks to a youth serving project well. Therefore, September's data system performance meeting, Sam and the whole committee are going to take a look at what do we look at for performance when it comes to review and rank specifically. Therefore, in tier 2, which you need to understand because of performance, the 2 bonus projects were in tier 2, in tier 1. One is the DV bonus, one is a fully permanent supportive housing expansion bonus. In tier 2, what you will find is the CASA, the straddled CASA bonus project for domestic violence, CASA's Gateway Rapid Rehousing for domestic violence, St. Vincent de Paul Rapid Rehousing, St. Vincent de Paul's expansion on their rapid rehousing, and HEP independence for permanent supportive housing is all in tier 2 that could be at risk. We also rejected 2 projects. One was Catholic Charities, Pathways, Rapid Rehousing, that was reallocated. And Hope Villages was rejected. Both were rejected due to fatal flaws.
This is coming from executive committee. We've already reviewed this, so I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further comments?
Just to note, the St. Vincent de Paul bonus that's in there is in there for a very little bit amount of money because of the allowable amount from HUD. And staff did check with St. Vincent de Paul and they want it in there for that amount. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, from a reporting standpoint, that for that amount of money, they're gonna have to do all they're fine with that.
Okay. Any other comments?
I just want to point out, I am in favor of this, but CASA was bumped to tier 2 for the rapid rehousing. I just want for everyone to know that the performance was a result of a high performing project that we needed to combine with additional money the CoC elected to give us for that project, which brought the entire score down to the 82. So we are at jeopardy of losing a very successful program. Again, it was a very difficult decision to make. I support it. I just want to point that out with that score of that 82 of that gateway housing.
All right, seeing or hearing no other comment, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed signify by saying nay. Hearing no nays, motion passes. We still have this. I need a motion for to receive the point in time count again.
Move to receive the point in time count.
I'll second it. Motion is second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, saying nay. Hearing no nays, motion passes unanimously. We have a consent agenda that we didn't get to.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any other comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing no nays, motion passes unanimously. Sorry, Carly, we'll pass your coordinated entry policies to the next meeting. We can't conduct any, we still have some time. We can't conduct any business after Loriana shuffles out the door. However,
Is anything from that coordinated entry urgent that needs to be put
I
into the next?
I was told no.
Okay.
It's the annual one.
So, future HLA and CoC planning, I'll go ahead and jump on the CoC train, which is we have board nominations. We will be voting. They're due shortly. I don't have it on the top of my head. If you know somebody who would be a good member of the board of directors, have them. It's on the HLA website. We will be reviewing them and then we will be voting on new members at our membership meeting in November. And we will be also be voting on the executive committee makeup of the board as well. So just on your radar as CoC, and I'll pass it over to Monica.
Hi, everyone. I will make this quick because I know everybody is rearing and ready to go. Just a couple of quick updates. First off, we would like to get it on the record to thank Susan for her many years of service. She will be leaving the HLA. She had resigned a while ago. And her last day will be next Friday. If you would like to share any messages with her, please send them to me. And I will make sure that she receives them all. So thank you, Susan, for everything. Staffing updates. So the HLA board is interviewing candidates for the permanent role. I know they're going to be doing 2 rounds of interviews, and it's my understanding the first round has been completed. With both the CEO and COO transition, we're looking at the structure of the HLA to ensure we are functioning as strong as we should be in conjunction with current leadership. We're working with the board for the transition. I want to thank Art, the HLA team, for their support. We will be sharing more information moving forward, but we want to make sure there's as minimal impact on the staff as possible during this. So I'm going to be meeting with Pamela this upcoming Wednesday to share a suggested org structure, and we will make any announcements as we have them. Funding updates. We talked about NOFO a little bit. We're moving forward with that. Obviously, special NOFO is moving forward. Everybody is doing, as a reminder, applications are due the 12th. Funding, we, thank you to the city of St. Pete for social action review and rank for 50,000 for flexible client assistance, which is great, and 50,000 to support a new position within the HLA for a team lead and an intake specialist, which will be huge for us. And also yesterday, thank you to the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners for unanimously approving our operating funds that we received from them, which is great. Next. Memberships, you can click on the little QR code. Applications are available. Any questions, please reach out to Victoria Kelly. And the Debbie Johnson Memorial Awards, our nominations are due the 30th of this month. That's all I have to share on that. And then finally, our homes, our votes, will be doing a training on October the 6th. This is a nonpartisan endeavor to encourage people to register to vote. And with the last few questions, does anybody have any questions for me about the HLA at this time?
That was very quick. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being so quick. However, let me just say, because it doesn't require a vote, I'm not sure we have to be so quick, because I want to make sure I'm understanding. So with the new charter, we've identified, I think, 3 or 4 somehow new positions, people who are eligible to sit on the board. I do know that there are a couple people from either Treasure Island, Gulfport, or a combination thereof who are interested, so I'll reach out to them to get that application. Brianna, if you can send the application so I can just forward, that would be helpful. Second, the screenshot or the doohickey that I'm supposed to do this for the Debbie Johnson Award. So that's due when?
September 30th.
Okay, so that's like really, really soon. So last year we had quite a few really, really impressive nominations for the Debbie Johnson Award, if you remember correctly. So and Gary McMath was selected for that award. I don't know if where are we right now? Have we gotten a lot of nominations for that award? That is under Victoria, but I can check for that right now. Because I just want to make sure that it doesn't get by us. September 30th is, I mean, it's going to be Christmas like tomorrow or something. So we just need to make sure that this one. I'm trying to get, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's been announced.
It has, okay. I just want to make sure that we've gotten nominations. Last year we had a lot of them. And so if we need to like up the antes on this, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are. We haven't gotten any nominations this year, so we'll send out more. Okay. I think we need to. Okay. There you go. I have a quick question. Your slide about.
Thanks. Everything else fine?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. About your slide about St. Pete Social Action Funding, $50,000 for 2 positions or for each of 2 positions? I mean, is it?
Oh, so it's separate. Yeah,
Okay.
it's so 50,000 for client assistance, 50,000 per position.
So St. Pete gave the CoC $100,000. Fantastic. Clearwater give the CoC anything?
I will look to be sure.
Yeah.
I know we get 288 from Pinellas County.
288,000 from Pinellas. Okay,
I can send you a full report.
that'd be great.
Yeah, you got it.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions? Do we have any other public comments or announcements? All right, we will be having a board meeting in November. We will need 10 people for in-person quorum.
I'll bring brownies.
We'll have brownies, we'll bribe you with brownies and
I'll bring coffee.
homelessness policy, whatever floats your boat. So please attend if you can, and so we can get the business of the CoC done. But thank you for those that were here. Thank you for those that attended online, and I will officially adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.